So it appears that Winds of Winter is actually coming despite a huge amount of YouTube videos speculating that he's given up. The latest update does assure us that he is in the final stages. And we have an update on House of the Dragon. I'll go to House of the Dragon first because it is a little mixed and problematic. George is becoming much more public and will be attending certain conventions which before he was prohibited from doing due to the pandemic. And that'll be interesting because a lot of questions that weren't answered about Season 8 might be fielded. It is a myth, however, that he never answered any questions. In fact, in a few interviews, he did, he sort of delved into it, and I will put up a video showing that. And again, he was a little evasive, but he did answer a few things, and you could sort of tease out that he wasn't entirely satisfied with the finale of Season 8, but he probably doesn't agree with the fans that it was the most horrific moment in television, which arguably it was. Now, in terms of House of the Dragon proper, he's both reassuring fans that there's a very high quality to the show, but it will not be a kind of page for page translation of Fire and Blood. So if you're a Fire and Blood fanatic, I'm not. I'm more lukewarm about the whole project. This will probably be disappointing because even I was hoping that they were going to do a few things or a few Easter eggs that would make the transition from Game of Thrones to House of the Dragon more pleasant. That apparently will not be the case. With Fire and Blood, it's written in a very interesting, weird style with multiple unreliable narrators. So we're getting a kind of fragmented history of the Targaryens. But the good side is at least a lot of mysteries and ambiguities. And he's saying that will be totally changed. We will be getting essentially an objective history of Westeros in this time period. We won't be getting flashbacks or unreliable memories or anything like that. Now, I don't believe him that he said it was just too prohibitive in terms of cost or they couldn't figure out how to do that in television. You can do that. I mean, it's been done in film for a very long time. So I just don't see how it would be impossible to translate it to television, especially on HBO, which does do experimental television. Granted, it may not do it well. Like with Watchmen television series, I've gotten a lot of feedback that it's just insanely terrible, but at least they were trying some interesting new avenues. So, puzzled that he's saying it wasn't possible for them to even try to match the book style. He's also saying that it actually improved upon his material quite a lot, especially with King Viserys. We're gonna have to wait and see if he's vindicated on that, but that's I also find a little suspicious because again, we've been down this road before where he thought certain aspects of Game of Thrones enhanced what he wrote in the novels. At least early on, he was happy with the decisions they made, and he only had a few disagreements with Benioff and Weiss, especially over Daenerys. Like, he had no problem that they aged her up in the books. She's much younger and been very controversial to show her sexuality at such a young age, but they also changed the nature of her marriage, as it were, to Drogo and things like that, and that he had a problem with. But apparently they're doing a much better job. The good news is that Ryan Condal does seem to be an actual hardcore fantasy fan. He actually knows the books, which of course is a very sly admission that Benioff and Weiss really didn't know the material, but they got control of it anyway. So that's good, but it's still very mixed in terms of moving away from the books and sort of asking us to trust him that it's actually a big improvement on it, which is like, well, if that's the case, why do we need more Fire and Blood books? We could just watch the show, but there we are. And now we get to Winds of Winter, where he confirms, because he does do a few of these updates where he gives us actual specifics, but this is pretty radically specific for him, that a bunch of Cersei chapters have been done. If you're totally new to the books, essentially what happened with books 4 and 5 is he split them. It was actually meant to be one book, but Crows and Dance, for lack of a better word, were cut artificially into two sections. And so a lot of characters that appear in one book don't appear in the other, and a lot of character stories in the other book aren't really focused on in quote unquote the first book. And one of the people who suffered was Cersei, even though a lot is going on in King's Landing and her fall from grace against the Sparrows and others, we only see brief glimpses of her. And there's a lot of dangling parts, especially with Jaime and Brienne. Essentially, Jaime apparently has decided to leave Cersei and he does leave King's Landing. Where is he? What is he up to? Unclear. Most people speculate he is going to hook up with Brienne. What's going to happen with them? Unclear. So there's just a lot of cliffhangers that were left open with Dance, but we don't quite know where it's going. But now he's giving us an update that yes, he's been working on the Cersei chapters, which means again he's at the stage where he's trying to formulate the structure of the chapters and how these revelations and twists are going to come to the reader, which suggests this is the final stages, and he's just thinking through how big does he want the book to be, how many characters should be focused on, who should be focused on, should things be revealed at this point, or should they be held over for the final book with Spring? And again, he is a perfectionist, so books are coming. It may take a couple years, but they are coming. Given the realities of publishing, probably we won't get it next year. But if it is happening next year, it may be towards the end in the fall or December, if we're very lucky. Again, if at this point you've checked out, you no longer care, that's fine, but I have to do research on this. So it's at least nice for me to frankly do some videos on it, but also get some questions I do have as a fan, especially over Marwyn, Quentin, and I am interested in sort of like the main story, but more how they impact the minor characters. That's what I'm kind of interested with Dorne and Varys and a few others. So at least I'd like to know a little bit more of what's going on with them. So it does appear that we are getting into the final stages of Winter. Again, we've been here before, but the way he worded it, it does seem like the basic book is finished, but he's more concentrating now on refining things and getting the material into a shape he'd be proud of. Which, after the long wait, I think he does owe it to us to at least make it a good presentation of the material he's been working on, arguably for 20 years.